We'll wait just another minute or two to allow a few more people to join. What is that sound? All right, I think we are at critical mass. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the IETF Newcomers Overview. We have a couple of excellent speakers lined up for you this morning. And we will go ahead and get started. Speaking today will be Rich Sauls and Anshul. Oh my goodness, Anshul, I just lost your last name. Mavrata? You'll have to fix it for me.
Yeah, it's Malhotra.
Well, I've known you for years and I still managed to mess that up. That's great. Anyway, I will hand it over to the two of you. At the end of this, excuse me, at the end of the slide presentation, there will be a survey and an email address for you to send feedback to. We're really interested in your feedback, so take notes as you're going through, and then you can tell us what we missed along the way. So I will hand it off to the two of you, and I will step back, and I'll be back at the end of the webinar. Talk to you all later.
Awesome. Thanks, Karen. And hello, everyone. I'm Anshul Malhotra, and just a little bit about myself. I recently finished my PhD from Boston University. Currently, I'm working at Ripple Labs as a software engineer. My focus here is on product protocol design and security. And I've been involved with IETF for quite a long time now. It's been, I think, almost 5 years. And I'll be honest, it has been a great experience. And I really hope that the same will apply to you as well. Although these are different times, we used to have in-person meetings and everything has moved online, but that's where we are. And let's get the best out of it. So this presentation today is divided roughly into 4 parts. First is the introduction to newcomers' activities at the IETF meeting. And just to be clear, when I say newcomers, it means those of you who have attended up to 5 meetings. And we define first-timers as the ones for who this is their first meeting. So during this presentation, we'll introduce you to some of the activities at the IETF meeting, then introduction to the IETF structure and its related organizations. A very brief overview, because there is a lot in there, but we'll give you a brief overview of this part. Then Rich will talk about the IETF week in a nutshell, like what to expect during the IETF week. And then we'll introduce you to some of the key people and additional resources for your survival during this week. And please feel free to ask questions after each section. I'll give a pause. There is a hand raise option, I believe. You can raise your hand anytime and ask a question. I would like to thank Scott Bradner and Mike Jones for drafting the earlier version of this presentation. I don't know them personally, but they have done an awesome job. Thanks for that. Can we move to the next slide? Well, welcome to the IETF. All right, so this slide, this is fine, yeah. Familiarize yourself with this slide and the following slide, because this is the one that you're going to see at the beginning of each working group session. It's a note well slide, as you can see, the name tells. So better note it well. Basically, this slide, it reminds you that by participating in the IETF in person or remotely, you agree to IETF policies on various topics. It's a pretty detailed, like all of you should read it at some point. You don't have to read it right now, but you'll see this text a lot during the IETF week. Next slide. This slide is also a part of the IETF Notewell. It lists a number of documents that all IETF participants agree to follow. So these documents are basically dedicated to describe topics such as you can see, there are BCPs, best current practices for Internet standards process, working group process. There is a document on anti-harassment procedures. Then there are code of conduct documents, copyright, and recently there has been a document about the, not very recent, but there is a document about the privacy policy, which describes that how the information that you provide to IETF is handled. So those of you who are like really concerned and interested in that sort of stuff should go and read this one. But please make sure that you are all familiar with these documents. Next slide. All right, so the newcomer activities at IETF 108. There are a number of events that are organized specifically for IETF newcomers early in the week or a week before to provide the necessary information and resources to help you all, to help the newcomers to get started and integrate with the community and make it easy for you guys to integrate with the community. So the first of all, as you are all here, this is a newcomers tutorial webinar. The one happened day before yesterday. This is our second webinar today, and we'll give you some stuff to get you started here. Then we have IETF virtual quick connections on Thursday, July 23rd. That's the week before IETF kicks off on Monday. We'll be using a virtual platform, most likely, Karen just told me we'll use a social tool called Gather to organize these virtual quick connections, and more information will be coming out soon on how you can register for these quick connections. Then there's this really cool thing, newcomer coffee breaks. There'll be a couple of coffee breaks this will be during the IETF week. And these are 15-minute sessions. And I've heard that it's a really, really cool browser-based setup where you can, move around and join different virtual spaces. So watch out for this. More information is coming out on how you can join these newcomer coffee breaks. Also, I hope you guys have registered for mentors, but if not, then it's highly recommended that sign up for a mentor. They are really useful resources to answer any of your questions one-on-one. You can ask for any kind of resources, any doubts, anything that you are unsure of, or anything that you want to get more involved with. They can introduce you to new people, make your way really, really easy through the IETF. So it's highly recommended that you sign up for a mentor. Also, I'd like to add that the IANA and RFC editors will have virtual desks in the meeting. There probably might be other virtual spaces and a map. You'll see a map that will be published soon on to get information on where all these virtual spaces are. So I would just like to say, please try to attend all of this as it will make easier for you during the rest of the week, like these early activities for newcomers. And there's this link on the top of the slide where you can go and check out for all the latest updates and more information on the newcomers activities. Next slide, please. Okay, any questions so far before we move on to the next section of more meat about IETF and its organizations? All right, seems like I was pretty clear. You can always post your question in the chat or interrupt me anytime. Okay, moving on to the second part of the presentation. First of all, let's talk about the scope of this tutorial. So let me tell you what you should expect from this presentation. The primary purpose of this presentation is to give you enough information, just enough information that you need to begin active participation in the IETF, and also provide a guide to resources of further information. We hope that this information will help you to survive the week. We'll also talk about how you can, approach different people and make connections. However, there is a lot more to learn about the IETF beyond what we'll talk about today. For instance, its history, history of the IETF, how to write a standards document, and many other things beyond that. But it would be too much, to squeeze all of that into this short hour. And it's not really essential to know all of this at your first meeting. Gradually, as you move along, you'll learn all these things on the way. Again, any questions at this point? There's this cool YouTube channel that that you can go to for more information about, for more in-depth information. Next slide. Okay, so let's talk about the IETF and its related organizations. I'll give you a quick overview of the structure of the IETF and the main groups and organizations that are a part of the IETF ecosystem. Next slide. So this is really, really important. First and foremost, what is the mission of IETF? And I'm going to read it loud. The mission of the IETF is to make the internet work better by producing high quality, relevant technical documents that influence the way people design, use, and manage the internet. What this means is that the purpose of IETF is to, first, develop and maintain standards for technologies used to provide internet service or to provide services over the internet. Functionality. Second point is functionality. Ensure that the technology that we produce here can perform the needed functions. The third important point is scalability. One of the idea or the missions of IETF is to ensure that the technology that we are working on here will support the proper scale of deployment and usage. Security is another important point. We have to ensure that the technology itself is secure and can be operated securely. And easy deployment, that's really important. We have to be sure that all of the technology that we are working on here, all our efforts can be deployed effectively, that the end result is good. In short, standards and technology developed at the IETF is secure, scalable, and can be deployed effectively. Next slide. IETF. So what is IETF? It's a standards development organization. We are a standards development organization, and there are various other standards organization you might have participated in or you might have come across or heard about. But I would like to emphasize here that we are like IETF is different from other standards organizations in various aspects. At the IETF, people participate as individuals. There is no formal membership. Other SDOs typically have memberships in some form and they are really individual based. At the IETF, and this is really cool, we do not have a formal voting process, but what we have is a hum culture. And we'll get back to that later in this presentation. Other SDOs typically, usually have some form of formal voting system, but here we believe in hums. There is no formal or special role for government or companies for that matter. Everyone is participating as an individual. Other SDOs are sometimes treaty based or they have some sort of connections with the government or other companies, but that's not the case with IETF directly. At the IETF, a standard is a standard when people or the market uses them. So adoption of standards is not mandated here. This is another point how it differs from many other standards as standard development organizations. Another point is that the IETF focuses on internet technologies, and that's like the main focus of IETF. Some other standard organizations have a broader scope. They cover a wide range of other technical, process, and physical standards. But the IETF is really focused on internet technologies. And the idea of structure and decision making is really bottoms up, and this is fairly unique to an SDO. So we are a standards development organization, but we are different from them in in several aspects. Next slide. Okay, so this is really interesting. If you're here for technology, like you're interested in working on core technology stuff, then you should definitely look into these areas. So the technical work at the IETF is done in its working groups. And IETF groups these working groups into a number of areas that are managed by each of these areas are managed by 2 or 3 area directors each, except the Gen area, which is owned by the IETF chair. Now, area directors are jointly responsible for making sure that the working groups in the area are well coordinated and that the challenges most important to the internet in that area are indeed being worked on. And IESG, I'll talk about what IESG is, basically decides which areas working groups belong to. Now here on the slide, you can see a list of 7 areas, but the number and focus of areas can change over time, and that depends on the need for more or less areas. Sometimes 2 areas may merge or a new one gets created. You can see on the slide, the names of these areas are very self-explanatory. There is art, applications, and real-time group. Then there is transport, which deals with the technical topics related to the data transport. There is routing area. Then there is internet area. People work on IPv4, IPv6. DNS comes under this area. Operations and management. Then there is security area, which deals with security protocols and mechanisms. And general area, which is directly controlled by the IETF chair. It mainly performs activities that are focused on supporting and updating IETF processes. So if you're interested in any of, you can go online and check out in detail about more about these areas or any specific area that you're interested in. And you can look like how you can get more involved with those areas. You can also ask for your mentor to help you guide through how you can be more active and participate in these areas. All right, next slide. The IETF and consensus. So consensus, I touched upon it a little bit before. Consensus is a key at the IETF. There is no formal voting at the IETF. And this is really, really important to understand because this is like one of the key features of the IETF as stated in its original mantra. We reject kings, precedents, and voting. We believe in rough consensus and running code. In particular, the IETF is supposed not to be run by a majority rule philosophy. Now, rough consensus is an interesting concept. It doesn't necessarily mean that everyone agrees in the end, but it is also not necessarily a compromise. So, rough consensus is reached when all concerns and issues are heard and addressed. They are not necessarily, all of them do not necessarily have to be accommodated as long as everyone, can live with the outcome. How this happens is the session chair for each working group is responsible to lead the discussion and make sure that all dissenting opinions are heard, but they should not be the controlling voice. And we measure consensus by humming. And by humming, I literally mean humming. How I would say. You have to it's a good way, to feel the temperature of the room. It does not tell us something unequivocally. It's a comparison. You can think of it as a comparison to see where a working group lies on a spectrum of completely acceptable and completely unacceptable. It's a rough measurement. And on top of it, it's anonymous. So you do not have to raise your hand in order to make your choice known. And that's how we roughly try to reach the consensus. It's also important to note that since not all the people who are interested in a working group or on a particular topic can attend the meeting, so a consensus call is usually carried over to the mailing list and basically repeated on a mailing list so that those who could not attend the meeting are also heard. And to learn more about this, RFC 7282 is a great read. I would recommend it for everyone to read. Yeah, that's about the IETF and its consensus mechanism. Next slide, please. As I mentioned earlier, the IETF culture is fairly unique in many aspects. And one of those, I'm going to explain how. So IETF is basically a self-selected group of diverse people, and this is because groups with great diversity are more likely to make better decisions. They can bring in different perspectives. So people here, since they are self-motivated, they're really passionate, they're strikingly efficient and effective, they're smart, and have strong opinions. People are vocal. And this can be a little overwhelming sometimes. Personally, it has been for me. But you know what? Eventually, you'll realize they are all just trying to find the best solution. They are just trying to put out their voice, listen to others, and reach the best solution. Another point is that technical excellence and topical knowledge is highly valued here. So please make sure that you have read the relevant documents before you make a comment at the mic, no matter what level you are at, what your background is, where you come from, which company you work for. If you have a technically sound argument to make, you'll definitely be heard and appreciated. In terms of dress code, the IETF culture, we do not have a formal dress code. It's pretty informal. People here love t-shirts. T-shirts are the usual dress code. You can wear whatever you're comfortable in. I don't know how much that applies to a remote meeting, but that used to be the case for the physical meeting. So yeah, basically it's pretty informal. You can choose whatever you're comfortable in. Then close working relationships. So people have been attending IETF meetings for past 30 years or so. Many people know each other for many years, which makes for a very, very good, familiar kind of atmosphere. And it's usually time for a lot of people to catch up with their friends and colleagues. But it can also sometimes, mean that there is a bit of an in-crowd language sometimes, but do not feel intimidated at all. It's a very, very inclusive group. Introduce yourself to others, try and talk to others, and try to have a good time. I guess you can do those in coffee breaks and other informal virtual sessions that are being organized. So yeah, that's a little bit how IETF culture is really unique from probably other standards development organizations. Next slide, please. All right, alphabet soup. There's a warning. As a newcomer, you might be overwhelmed by a lot of acronyms that you will see during the week of IETF. I would recommend not to focus too much on them. There's a lot of moving parts that makes IETF work. Instead, I would suggest you to focus more on the technical areas that you're interested in, and you'll learn about all of these moving parts as you go on and continue to participate at IETF. Take this coming week of IETF, lightly on these acronyms, but I'll give you an overview of what these are. So there are several other bodies other than IETF that interact with the IETF. These are basically different groups of people who are responsible for the technical and administrative management and organization of different parts and activities at IETF. Now, in this presentation, we'll focus only on the aspect of these organizations and activities that are immediately relevant to IETF newcomers, but there are others as well. So as you can see on the slide, there are four of these that are written on the slide. IESG, that is Internet Engineering Steering Group. All the areas and working groups are under this body. Then we have IRTF, Internet Research Task Force. IAB, I'll talk about a little bit more on the next slide about these. Then there is IAB, Internet Architecture Board, and IETF LLC. And in the next slide, we have the tasks for these organizations. Okay, IESG, so Internet Engineering Steering Group. It's responsible for the technical management of IETF activities, including the final approval of specifications as Internet standards. It consists of area directors who are selected by NOMCOM, that is the nomination committee, and are appointed for a period of 2 years. Then we have IRTF, Internet Research Task Force. It's a parallel organization to IETF, which focuses on longer-term research issues related to the internet, while the parallel organization IETF focuses on short-term issues of engineering and standards making. There is a number of focused long-term research groups here. There is CFRG that discusses and analyzes general cryptographic aspects of security protocols. Then there is HRPC, which is Human Resources Protocol Community. Sorry if I name it wrong, but there is HRPC that basically does research on whether standards and protocols can enable, strengthen, or threaten human rights. Then there is MapRG, ICCRG. There's a lot of them. So if you're interested in research, longer-term research problems, definitely I would recommend to look into various working groups in there. Then we have IAB, Internet Architecture Board. It provides long-term technical direction for internet standards, and it provides oversight of the internet, of the architecture, of the protocols and procedures that are used by the internet. They're also responsible for the editorial management and publication of the RFCs. Then another one is IETF LLC that provides the corporate legal home for the IETF, the IAB, and the IRTF. All right, that was quite a bit. I'll pause here and ask if anyone has any questions before we move on to the next session. Awesome. All right. I'll hand it over to Rich then. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Anshul. Okay, so my name is Rich Sauls. Pronouns are I, me, mine, he, him, they. I apologize. I seem to have woken up with a bit of a cold. So if you see my head duck off screen, it's because I'm wiping or blowing my nose. All right, I'm going to talk about what the IETF week is like. I guess the key word is we're obviously, with the circumstances with the virus, where it's changed. This next meeting we're having is the second time we've done a virtual meeting. We've had virtual interims before where individual working groups, like Anshul mentioned, get together, but this is the second time we've had a whole meeting be online. It's not that we're making it up as we go along. We like to say that we're improvising to figure things out. So, okay. Some of this we'll talk about the way things have been, a mix of what we're planning on doing for a couple of weeks from now. We all want to get back to real, face-to-face meetings, but it's going to be some time, obviously, before that is safe for us to do. All of this still holds. There are many things on the IETF agenda for the meeting week. We have about 130 working groups focused on particular areas. Anshul and our background is in security stuff. But there are, there's the technical protocols of the domain naming system, the thing that turns www.foo.com into a IP address. Then there's there's separate groups for operationally how you handle the domain system, all the way to time and network security, routing, how you get the packets from here to there, how different groups on the internet exchange packets and so on. There are about 130 working groups. A subset of them are meeting at any given week. I believe it's about 60 next week, week after that. Birds of a Feather session is where people get together and say, hey, I think we have an interest here. Let's see if it makes sense to create a working group. The IETF, as Anshul mentioned, has a number of research groups analogous to working groups that do long-term looking at things. There are area-wide sessions, the list you mentioned at the beginning, security, internet, routing, transport. They often have whole area meetings. Often one of those is figuring out where to dispatch work within a group, an area. There's a plenary. Plenary is a Latin word that means everyone. So there's nothing else scheduled, and there will be discuss operational administrative issues. Here's what our budget is. Here's how we're trying to cope with the virus and so on. This time, obviously, there's no invited lunch talk. Typically, the sponsor will have somebody senior technical come and talk about something that's interest. We do have a deep dive on DNS work that's coming up. Social events, there aren't. We have informal chats with this Gathered Town web-based conferencing tool. It's like Animal Crossing for technical people. Tutorials. This is one of them. We usually give these Sundays, usually given to tutorial day, but we're not having others this year. Hot RFC is someone gets a chance to speak for 4 minutes, or in this case, prepare a video for 4 minutes. It's open. Anyone can come and see if there's interest in things. There will be open time for meetings, side meetings. Karen and Anshul mentioned the coffee breaks and so on. It's a very busy week. Normally in the face-to-face thing, and even virtually, we still have a lot of these things going on. There are activities not on the agenda. Obviously, we can't just sort of meet at the hotel bar, but we can still meet socially in jabber rooms, chat rooms, and so on. There is an app for the weekly agenda. The link at the bottom. Oh, by the way, I should mention these slides are now available on the Newcomers page. It's worth downloading them, if only so that all the links you see here are clickable. Okay, excuse me one sec. The IETF meeting, the next one, 108, is all virtual. Everything that I just mentioned before is now a week-long virtual meeting. The meetings are run from 11 a.m. to 15:50. I have to, and that's in UTC time. It is scheduled for the normal working hours of the host country. So this would have been in Spain, and so we're in, equivalent to Spain time zone. All information is linked on the Datatracker page. The Datatracker is the website within the IETF that holds all of the documents, the drafts, the RFCs, the meeting agendas, the meeting materials, and serves as the workflow coordinator. It's a very complicated, powerful set of Django Python scripts that handle all of the flow. There is additional information at the bottom link how to participate remotely. Obviously, you folks here have already got a leg up on everyone because you understand how you were able to log into MeetEcho and do things. We are figuring out a workflow for how the working groups will handle. Basically, there'll be presentations via MeetEcho like this. The chat balloon that you might see on the left side of your screen will be used more. And the primary use of the chat room will be to say you want to raise your hand to talk, and then you'll be given the mic, the virtual mic. Working group sessions are the biggest part. It's the main reason why many people come. Most of the work in the working group is done on mailing lists before the meeting, between meetings. And the point of face-to-face meetings is to solve key issues, give updates on what's happened on documents since the last meeting. The sessions, especially now, obviously are streamed and recorded. The YouTube channel, link available off the slides, will list all of the meeting sessions, and it's all on YouTube. The charter, which is what the group is supposed to be working on and has milestones and a timetable, that's negotiated with the with the area director, approved by the overall ISG. Chairs are appointed, and then chairs are appointed, and then the working group meets. The chairs are not the technical leaders; they are administrative people who keep the workflow going. The IESG and the area directors appoint the chairs. The chairs pick the editors who are working on the documents, run the meetings, handle the consensus calls. Like Anshul mentioned, we work by doing humming. We're trying to find the best alternative to humming in a virtual environment. Usually at some point during this tutorial, we do an example hum. Obviously, we can't do it now. So everyone getting a feeling for what it's like. It's kind of weird when you hear this whole room sort of humming. And we're trying to find the closest analog to that for face-to-face virtual meetings. I mentioned birds of a feather. They meet once. That's Miriam Kune presenting on something. She was also presenter at the previous tutorial. Quick, had 300 people at their BOF. There are a couple of birds of a feather sessions listed. If you think you might, the discussion here is less not constrained, less organized, more informal, to see if there's interest in the IETF working on something. BOFs can succeed or not, and succeeding doesn't necessarily mean a working group is formed. We had a BOF on internet-based file systems and decided that we couldn't compete with things like Dropbox, SIFs, and so on. So we did not create a working group. The BOFs are listed in the agenda sessions. And if it all seems interesting, show up, and you can be less, you don't have to do extra work. You can just be prepared to talk about your experiences and whether or not you think the IETF should work on it. The IETF It's part of the IAB, so the same umbrella for the IETF and the IRTF. They share a lot of the same structures: IRTF, IETF, working group, research group, and so on. One of the useful things they do, neat things they do, is they provide an annual networking research prize, and means flying out the authors to receive their award. I don't recall which paper this was, and I'm not sure what they're doing this time since there's no place to fly anybody to. Applied Networking Research Group. This is an ACM meeting. It's restarted meeting annually in conjunction with the IETF. It's an academic workshop. So part of the mutual benefits here is bringing academics into the engineering disciplines of the IETF. There's a great tutorial from Sharon Goldberg, who was a professor at BU, Anchal's advisor, who said, here's what the IETF is like for academics, and here's why, publishing papers isn't the same as writing an RFC. And it's very interesting to see the two worlds interact. They're meeting during the week. There was a separate registration process. There is no cost, no additional cost. And you have to look at their agenda to see what sessions you want to go on. It's held co-located or co-presented or co-virtual with the IETF. Area-wide sessions, plenaries, we're not having any invited lunch talks. The plenary, in physical space would take up the whole large ballroom, nothing else goes on. Same thing, there'll be nothing else going on during the administrative plenary this time. Hackathon. The hackathon is happening the week before the IETF. Obviously, it's a virtual hackathon. There are a number of areas off the Newcomers page, off the general IETF 108 page. You can find a link to the hackathon. You sign up and register for that. And this is where people work on prototypes of protocols, prototypes of platforms, and so on. The people often bring their own special hardware or plugins to their laptops and so on. It's a very intense time. This is where we had TLS-13 did interops here. Secure Time did it. DNS, new types of naming records, has gone through this kinds of stuff. It's often, the past few have all been sponsored by Cisco. Developer Network, very nice of them. Code Sprint is different than a hackathon. The Code Sprint is a 1 or 2 day session where we work on the code that runs the Datatracker. So for example, once you have got a recent thing that I really like is we've added federated login to the Datatracker. So if you've got an IETF account, which are free and open to anybody working on IETF stuff, you can then use that to, for example, log into the Meet Echo. So in the future, that will record your agreement with the Note Well policies that Anshul mentioned at the beginning, and link up who people are talking and so on. Other features, bugs, this RFC doesn't display properly, things like that. Networking and social events. The left is, I think, the Singapore National Aquarium from 2 years ago. The right is the IETF Sisters Lunch, SYSTERS, for people who present as women. Neither things are happening this time in the virtual environment. The closest we can come is, hallway chats and this gathered.town virtual thing, which will be announced on the mailing lists and available on the website. Side meetings. This is a way to have an online analog of, I want to get a bunch of people together to talk about DNS service bindings or network to network, border routing protocols, and how we can get the use a resource public key to secure the routing information. There's a wiki, which means anybody who has an account, again, accounts are free, can modify that, look at it. There'll all be online meetings hosted through the infrastructure, such as MeetEcho here. There's going to be a technical deep dive on DNS. You know, this is a joke about, well, I've got a problem, it's not DNS. Oh, yes, it is. It's always DNS. Really very interesting stuff. So if it's worth understanding something, and it's a nice way to learn some new technology for most people. Hot RFCs, there was just a note published. If you've got a 4 minutes video you want to talk about things, it's a good way. I've gone with the ACME working group, which does certificates. I've gone up to the Hot RFC and said to people afterwards, hey, come present to my working group. So it's another way to get revitalized or new technologies into the IETF. Apologize for my sniffles. General meeting etiquette. This is the most important one. Read the documents before attending the working group. Part of the reason for that is you'll be lost if you don't read the documents first, because all people talk about deep discussion of technical issues. And when there's no tutorials about what this internet draft is. There'll be slides on, this is what I changed from draft 18 when last we met to draft 21, or draft 19, or 20, or 21, 22. And so you'll be lost if you don't read the drafts. One of the things the IETF does is they lock down the Datatracker so that there's conventionally a week before the IETF so that no new drafts are published, so that people have time to download and read the documents. And then can be prepared at the meeting to discuss things or get questions answered if there's stuff, if there's information in the draft that's not clear, that can be discussed on the mailing list or at the meeting. If you want to say, hey, I don't, this wasn't clear to me, that's one point. If you say, well, what did you, can you explain this to me? I don't get this technology. That's not generally something that would happen as much. You'd find someone offline or do some research, say, on the mailing list. Behave respectfully and tolerantly toward all participants. We hope that goes without saying. We do have some mechanisms to enforce it. I'll mention some of the resources we have at the end. Talk and listen, have a good time. It is fun. Even with this online, it's going to be an exhausting several hours a day. Remember to sleep. As my wife said, oh, it's great. You get to be jet lagged in your very own home if you're not actually in, say, Europe. Good advice, virtual or real world. Bringing new work. A lot of newcomers come in with an idea they've been working on, they want to bring it to the IETF. Here is an overview on how to do it. We won't get into too much on it in this tutorial. Actually, not much beyond the slide. There's a video, and there was a previous tutorial about how to do it, bring work. You find some people who have similar interests. You can discuss it. It's either in the Hot RFC session, the social hours, coffee hours that we'll be hosting, talk to an area director, such as dispatch groups, as I said, which say, yeah, this is work good, propose a BOF. The BOFs for this meeting are all set, but you can certainly go to a BOF, see what it's like, and then work on a proposal for the next meeting. The IETF currently meets 3 times a year. Obviously, with global warming and the virus, things are in flux, but that's still the plan. Online version. Practice good online meeting practices. Practice. Test the configuration in advance. Anshul, Karen, and I, and our MeetEcho facilitators, we all met, half an hour before. Test the mic, test the screen sharing. Use a headset if possible. If you're in a quiet place like Anshul, you don't need to. I've got dogs and people walking around, so I need it. Speak slowly and clearly. Yeah, I'm not great at that. Technical questions, comments, always welcome. Not as tutorial things, but as making sure you understand, or say, have you considered that if you do this, then that's going to be an issue. The Jabber channel, every working group has a Jabber channel. In addition, there's online chat through all of the MeetEcho. All of the working group meetings are going to be handled through MeetEcho. The MeetEcho channel will be mainly used to say, I'd like to talk. The chairs will recognize you and then enable your mic. The Jabber channel is for more informal discussion, sometimes snarky, sometimes very technical. It's just like people. This looks like a session from the Acme working group. That's Yov, my co-chair. All right, any questions on that? You can type them in the chat room or click to talk. Otherwise, I'll mention some of the resources. Being mindful of the time, I think I should just move ahead. The Secretariat, this is the paid staff that runs all of the flow. They'll be around behind the scenes more on the virtual meetings. They're great people. They wear blue shirts all week, and then on Friday they all wear Hawaiian shirts. They will have virtual desks set aside, so if you have a problem with your registration, ability to log in, not sure where to go for a particular thing, there'll be a help desk that the Secretariat will have. The RFC editor, this is also a paid group of people who handle the publication end of turning the group written internet drafts into formal publications. The IANA is the Internet Assigned Numbers Authority. Again, Secretariat, group of people who manage, HTTP is on port 80, SSH is on port 23, mail is on 25, those kinds of numbers. There's also a bunch of registries such as what the types and names of records look like in DNS, so the extensions in TLS. When we get back to meeting face-to-face, if you are still involved, and I hope everyone here will be, the great thing about these people is they always sprinkle little candies on their desk. So if you want to walk by between meetings and grab a little candy bar and say hi, they're happy. Jay Daly is recently hired executive director. He keeps, the flow going, handles the contracting of a lot of things, worries about budgets and stuff. He's based in New Zealand. Nice guy. The Ombudsteam. These are people from Allison, Pete, and Melinda. Allison is former head of the research test, IETF. Pete is very involved. You might recall seeing his name on the harassment and humming consensus documents. Melinda Shore's former working group chair, currently on the IAB. We take harassment concerns very seriously. We want to be a very welcoming and inclusive organization. We'd like to reflect the internet users and community as a whole. Computer science people aren't necessarily the most outgoing and friendly. And so that's okay, but if it borders over into rudeness or making somebody else feel uncomfortable, we want to make sure that gets corrected as quick as possible. So you can reach them. There's also an email, Ombudsteam at the IETF. I'm going to skip the dots and ribbons because we don't have badges this time. Other resources for newcomers. There was a DAO of the IETF. I consider a DAO to be, Taoisms to be small, short, pithy phrases that sort of break your brain. What is the sound of one hand clapping? That kind of stuff. This is a longer document, but it talks Informally, about the way the IETF considers itself. There is a general information page on newcomers, for newcomers. We'll have things like the slides, information about the social groups, the mentoring, the guides program, one-on-one. You get set up with somebody who has similar, you guys speak, people who can speak the same language. I'm American, so if it's not English, I'm really out of my depth. And coordinate with them so they will be available to you during the course of the week. And there's also tutorials, and the deep dives are also available there. There's a mailing list for the first time attendees, highly recommended to join. There's also a 108 attendees mailing list. That will probably be less volume and more use, because usually what happens is the week before it becomes people looking for social tickets, people trying to carpool to get from the airport. Obviously, none of that is happening this time, so the list is much less useful. Sisters, as I mentioned, anybody can, there's a blog entry that points to it. And then there's the meeting list of meeting lists, which is at the bottom there. You can always unsubscribe if a list gets, too overloading. The IETF does a lot of work on email. No Slack, no Jabber, things like that. The Datatracker, datatracker.ietf.org. There's a DNS alias, so dt.ietf.org. And then you can find the working groups, you can find the areas, you can find other organizations within there. The tools I would not worry about as much. That's once you start preparing RFCs. The IETF has recently finished a working group that describes best practices for using GitHub, or just Git. There's a number of working styles that are documented as to how to do things. Meetecho, thanks to our fine folks here. They're great. We help them, we give them a market, they help us, they're invaluable. And the integration with Datatracker is a really cool thing. On the agenda page, you'll find a link to the appropriate Meetecho session. In the real world meetings, they're in the back of the room with all the video equipment, and the cameras and so on. And now here they'll be even more in the background, but we do want to make a point of saying thank you to them. They spent a lot of time and a lot of work to make everything go very smoothly as far as video conferencing goes. Jabber, it's the informal name of the protocol. It uses XMPP. It's not used much anymore outside of the IETF. But every working group will have a Jabber room set aside for it, for informal chat, technical chat, hooking up and meeting with fellow travelers and so on. Enjoy it. It's going to be a different experience. It's going to be highly worthwhile. Anshul mentioned it's an interesting group of people. It will be tiring. Your brain will stretch. And we hope this will be the first of many meetings, so that, a couple of years from now, you can be one of those people who is one of the long-term friendships and technical colleagues. So there is a survey. Please click on that. We take the feedback very, very seriously. The slides get revised almost every time based on the feedback. If you have any questions or you haven't been able to get the links or whatever, you can find them on the Newcomers page, or email to that edu team that will get Anshul, me, Karen, and a whole bunch of other people involved behind the scenes in preparing tutorials, demos, Newcomers guides, and things like that. And so, having filled up all the time, I guess I would say thank you. Hope to see you on the screen in a couple of weeks, and look forward to seeing participation. Thank you, Mateo.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care. Have a good day. Stay safe and healthy.